Onward to Belfast from Edinburgh. EasyJet didn't waste any time in the air. Our flight was absolutely parabolic. It felt less like commercial aviation and more like a brief, aggressive toss across the Irish Sea, the transatlantic equivalent of flying from Dallas to Austin. Just as my ears began to pop and I questioned my life choices, the captain called for landing. We had traveled 114 miles as the crow flies and spent roughly 11 seconds at cruising altitude. After settling in, our first full day began with breakfast at The Pocket. It is quite literally a pocket-sized cafe tucked into a narrow alleyway, or a close, as the locals call it, just to confuse the tourists. It's a quaint little place with barely enough room for its tables and chairs, but it makes up for its lack of square footage with a truly great menu. We then made our way to St. George's Market. This award-winning Victorian-style weekend market basks under a massive sweeping roof built by the city between 1890 and 1896. Today, it's a vibrant food park hosting over 300 stalls of local food, handmade swag, and live music. It's incredibly dog-friendly, and in beautiful nod to inclusivity, it even runs a quiet hour each day for sound-sensitive customers. The atmosphere is joyous now, which stands in stark, poignant contrast to its history. During the Blitz in World War II, the market was used as an emergency mortuary. By the 1980s, the aging facility was desperately in need of expensive upgrades, and the city of Belfast considered selling the land to developers. Thankfully, the citizens launched a fierce campaign to fund a total restoration, saving the market's soul and officially reopening its historic doors in 1999. Our next stop was the Titanic Belfast Museum. The Titanic, along with her sister ship, the Olympic, were born right here at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast Harbour. The museum itself is a striking piece of architecture built on the exact site of the dry docks where the Giants were constructed. The building is cleverly designed to mimic the shape of the Titanic's bow, giving you a dizzying sense of the ship's actual size. Literally thousands of men swarmed this site after the keel was laid in 1909, completing the physical structure by 1911. Inside, an excellent interactive ride whisks you through the dark and frankly terrifying conditions of early 20th century shipyard work. The exhibits are packed with genuine relics and the deeply moving personal stories of the passengers and crew who perished. It's a touching tribute to the heroics and tragedy. Interestingly, the catastrophe forced the hand of maritime authorities. Many of the fatal mistakes made during that voyage were legally remedied by changes in international law. Because of the Titanic, the world gained mandatory lifeboat quotas for all passengers, regular lifeboat drills, 24-hour staffed radio operators, and the International Ice Patrol. A bit of trivia, the disaster also popularized the maritime world's first use of the SOS distress call. The next day, we hit the road toward Bushmills on the north coast. Along the way, we stopped at Grace Hill, a fascinating UNESCO World Heritage Site that began as a Moravian church town in 1763. The Moravians were a breakaway sect of Catholics turned Protestants who fled Bohemia around 1457, settled in Germany, and eventually, much like the Quakers, came to Ireland to escape persecution. They established a highly structured religious settlement that remains remarkably intact today. While waiting for the Millside restaurant to open for lunch, we had the absolute pleasure of meeting a lovely 93-year-old local woman named Roberta Thompson. Realizing we were tourists, she graciously gave us a spontaneous first-hand tour of her hometown. Roberta explained that the Moravians were once strictly segregated in all daily activities. Men and women, boys and girls, were kept entirely separate until marriage. Even the local cemetery is rigidly split, with women resting on one side and men on the other. A lifetime of segregation extending right into eternity. Today, they are fully integrated and boast a sizable global presence stretching across Africa, Europe, and the U.S. We eventually made our way to Bushmills and the legendary Giant's Causeway on the northern coast, where the shores of Scotland were clearly visible a mere 60 miles across the water. It was a wildly dramatic coastline, defined by wind-whipped crashing waves churning up what had to be freezing ocean water. Rising from the shoreline are thousands of interlocking basalt columns. They are almost perfectly hexagonal, looking so symmetrical that you'd swear they were cut by a machine rather than nature. In reality, they are the dramatic footprint of an ancient volcanic eruption from the Paleogene era, some 45 million years ago. After the steep walk back up from the beach, we sought refuge in the historic Causeway Hotel. To revive our spirits, we ordered a beautiful charcuterie board, and since we were in Bushmills, I naturally sampled a glass of their famed local whiskey. There would be no Jameson ordered here. We were in the homeland of its historic rival. The history of the water of life is a contentious one. Ireland and Scotland still fiercely debate who invented it. As a rule of thumb for travelers, whiskey with an E is distilled in Ireland. Whiskey without an E belongs to Scotland. The consensus is that Irish monks first experimented with Mediterranean distillation techniques around 1405, calling the amber liquid aqua vitae. However, the Scots were quicker on the paperwork, with the drink first appearing in Scottish tax records in 1494. By the 1780s, the government stepped in to force distillers to be licensed, which inadvertently birthed a booming, romantic tradition of backyard moonshining and dodging the taxman, a game of cat and mouse that feels alive and well in the culture even today. The next day, we transitioned to the Republic of Ireland, catching an Irish rail train south to Dublin. It was a remarkably comfortable 2-hour ride with only 3 stops, cutting through a landscape so intensely green and scenic that it looked like a postcard for the Emerald Isle. We had apparently used up our good weather allowance in Belfast because Dublin welcomed us with a biting cold wind and intermittent rain showers. As we rode to our hotel, our Uber driver cheerfully informed us, in Ireland, you can get all 4 seasons in a single day. By nightfall, we had the receipts to prove he was right. After dropping our bags, we motored over to the Brazen Head for lunch. Established in 1198 on the site of an ancient hotel, it is officially Dublin's oldest pub. It sits at the foot of the Father Matthew Bridge, crossing the River Liffey, the original entry point for the old Viking settlement. Dublin's Gaelic name actually translates to the town of the ford of reed hurdles, a nod to the ancient method of stomping down river reeds to cross at low tide before the era of bridges. Inside, the pub absolutely reeks of the 17th century ambiance, with heavy ancient doors still separating the low-ceilinged rooms. Sitting at the bar, we found ourselves surrounded by walls lined with hundreds of US dollars, British pound notes, and euros, the local currency as the Republic remains proudly in the EU. The walls were also plastered with shoulder patches from various global law enforcement agencies. By pure coincidence, I spent my lunch sitting directly beneath a patch for the California Highway Patrol. No trip to Dublin is complete without paying homage to the Holy Grail of Stout, so we attended the Guinness Storehouse tour at the historic St. James Gate Brewery. The experience is housed in a beautifully remodeled, multi-story building shaped like a giant pint glass. The story began in 1759 when a visionary, Arthur Guinness, signed a 9,000-year lease on the disused brewery site for the grand sum of £45 a year. Frankly, if you ask me, that's the greatest real estate deal in human history. Though it began as an ale brewery, Guinness pivoted exclusively to stout in 1799. The dark beer, with its famously creamy head and tingly acidic finish, achieved by a precise nitrogen and carbon dioxide blend, became a global phenomenon. At one point, it was even marketed as a legitimate medicine and routinely prescribed to nursing mothers and hospital patients. Today, over 10 million pints are poured globally every single day across 49 countries. My favorite takeaway was the history of their logo. The famous Guinness harp trademark is modeled on the 14th century Trinity College harp. When the Irish government later wanted to use the harp as its official national emblem, they actually had to alter the direction it faced to avoid a copyright violation with the brewery. In Ireland, beer comes before state. As our journey came to an end, a fellow traveler asked which city I preferred. While the people everywhere were exceptionally warm, helpful, and friendly, Belfast felt a bit more industrial, edgy, and commercially intense. We passed our fair share of closed businesses with heavy iron gates, plenty of graffiti, and visible homelessness, giving certain corners a slightly rougher feel. Dublin, by contrast, felt cosmopolitan, yet distinctly welcoming and less hectic. The area we stayed in, near King Street, was vibrant, clean, and colorful, with very little graffiti and a wonderful open energy. Still, the hospitality across the island was unforgettable, highlighted by a lovely shop worker who politely apologized to us, genuinely worried she had offended us by mistaking us for Canadians. I fell completely in love with both Scotland and Ireland, and like anyone who's tasted the water of life, I'm already plotting my return. Well, thanks again for watching Rocks in My Sandals. I'm Nick, and we'll see you down the road.